Welcome to Women at Imperial Week 2017. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I'm saying nothing. My name is Dr. Rufus. I'm the Provost Envoy for Gender Equality, sometimes called as being bossy or something. I can't imagine why. My delightful task this evening is simply to introduce Anjana Ahuja, who is an Imperial alum, very importantly, but also is going to facilitate our discussion tonight, who will arrange the introduction. So I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Can everybody hear me? Excellent. Okay. So I want to welcome you all to this event, which we've called Gender Equality's Ongoing Challenges. And I've added a slightly more newspapery bit to that, which is struggles, strategies, and some successes for women trying to get to the top. So I want to welcome you, and I also want to welcome the online viewers who are tuning in on Imperial College's YouTube channel. So as you know, this is Women at Imperial Week. It's time to coincide with International Women's Day tomorrow, and we're thinking about all things gender. And the great thing about Imperial is it has a lot of kudos, and it can pull together an amazing panel through its links with Imperial Business Partners. And we're going to hear from our very illustrious panel shortly. But before I do that, I just want to say that it's been more than 20 years since I was at Imperial. I was here as an undergraduate doing physics, and I was also here as a postgraduate doing a PhD in physics. And I remember being visibly in a minority then. I'm really pleased coming back 20 years later that it is absolutely not the case now. When I look around at Imperial and I walk around, as I have done occasionally over the past few years, you see a lot more women about. But what's interesting is that actually in the workplace, you wonder how much things have caught up. And so in the STEM industry in this country, in the UK, about 14% of the workforce are women. And we are approaching a digital skills crisis, as the government's identified. This country needs another 750,000 workers. And if you're not going to tap into half the population, it's a struggle to see how you're going to accommodate that. I also was looking up some statistics. I happened to be on a Facebook live chat for the FT last week on this issue, which was tied to the Uber controversy. So who's heard about what happened at Uber? There was a woman engineer who left after having what sounded like quite a torrid time. She blogged about it, a sort of a catalogue of sort of really discrimination, and it raised once again the issues surrounding women in the workplace. So before I go on too much on the statistics, I want to introduce our panel because it's their expertise and voice and experience you want to hear tonight. So to my left in order, we have Alison Atkinson, who is the Director of Capital Projects at AWE and responsible for £2 billion worth of investment. Next to Alison, we have James Sterling, who's the Provost of Imperial College. Then we have Nupur Mallick, who's the HR Director for Tata Consultancy Services. And last but not least, we have Rachel Higham, who joined BT in December 2015 and is the Chief Information Officer for the BT Group, which is very senior. So we've got a really senior panel. And the way we're going to do this is I've asked each of the panellists to speak for no more than 2 minutes, just say who they are and what their perspective is on this issue. After they've done that, we'll have a panel discussion picking up some of the themes. And then after that, we're going to open up the Q&A. Just so you know, you can raise questions from the floor, but we are using Slido. You can go to your phone to ask questions. You can, if you access the website, it's up there, www.slido.com. You can tap in your question. You can leave a name or not leave a name, and you'll be able to see some of the questions coming up. And that also allows our online audience to submit questions too. And before we go to our panels, I just want to mention a couple of other things. One is, please give a hand to Peter Morey in the corner, who is the illustrator who has the immense task of summing the entire event up in one picture. How he's going to do it, I don't know, but I'm in awe already. And then finally, to wrap up, I'm going to ask each of the panellists to make a pledge related to women in the workplace, their own workplace, and their own pledge, so that we can come away with a kind of legacy from this event. I think that's really important. So if you would like to kick off, Alison, please.
It's always worth going first.
2 minutes. You can say what you set the tone.
I will.
Thank you.
So you already know what I do, but you don't necessarily know who I am. And I always start these conversations as, first and foremost, I'm a mother of 3, a partner of 20 years, and I happen to be a chartered civil engineer. I didn't come to Imperial, I actually went to Manchester, but that has been the basis of my career, if you like, and I've been in it over 25 years. Why is this so important to me is I think many of us who've gone through our industry have had to put up with a bit of rubbish that they shouldn't really have to put up with. And it's challenging those barriers. And for me, diversity particularly, and the inclusion of difference, means that you get a different view of thought, you start making better decisions, and you start innovating. And that's so important for business, because it's the only way that we're going to stay ahead, and it's the only way that we're going to attract talent, and the wider talent pool across the business, across the country. So that's why I'm here, and to have that conversation.
James.
Yes, I started a long time ago doing research. My academic career in a particularly esoteric branch of physics. And it took me a while, but I began to realize there's not many women in this area. And that was just an observation. And then as I got a bit older and wiser, I began to realize, well, this is actually a problem. And why is it a problem? I mean, Anjana, you hit on part of it. You're only tapping into half the talent pool. And then secondly, as Alison said, in my subject, most of the work is done in teams. And the best teams, in my view, are teams which have diversity, people coming at a problem from different perspectives, different cultural backgrounds, and gender diversity as well. So I began to realize, look, this is a problem for my subject. We don't have enough women in it. And when I was in a position to recruit women to join our group and our institute, I realized that it was easier to find women from overseas, that there was a specific or a particular problem in the UK, and other countries seem to have cracked this issue. So fast forward, and I find myself in a position of not just realizing this was a problem, but being in a position to do something about it, to try and do something about it. I came here in 2013 and made gender equality one of my personal priorities for the college, and was very pleasantly surprised to find that the college was quite far along the journey. That was a nice surprise. Within the university sector, the Athena Swan Charter provides the framework for addressing these issues, and here at Imperial we're very committed to Athena Swan, and as I say, that's helping us move along the road to get to the place where we want to be. Just for one final thing, very happy to be here today, because you can invent the wheel yourselves, but there's nothing like sharing experiences with people from other organisations, sharing best practice. So I'm looking forward to hearing what my co-panelists have to say.
Absolutely, we're going to share some of those. Nupur.
Thank you, Anjana. I am Nupur. I'm the HR director for TCS in UK and Ireland, and I'm a mum of 2 children. I have got 18 and 6-year-old at home. I'm here because I want to give the same experience and talk about my experience, which I would like other women to go through. I've been very lucky to be part of the company for 20 years. I have worked at the first company I started working for, and I've been with them for 20 years now. And I have been very lucky to not experience any struggle or challenges which people talk about. And that's why it has become my personal agenda that I ensure that I give the women at the workplace the same exposure, the same experience, and the other women outside as well. And it's like you're just not having any issues. I have taken big risks in my life. I have asked for a role which were much bigger than me, and those risks have always paid for. And those are my personal experience which I would like to talk about.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you. So I'm Rachel Higham. I'm the CIO, Chief Information Officer of BT Group. I spent 22 years being a technologist and being one of the very few women in any room or table I've sat around. And as I moved into people leadership and building my own teams, I really wanted to make sure I addressed that imbalance and started to build truly diverse and inclusive teams, whether that be inclusive from in terms of gender, sexuality, disability, educational background, or even social background. All of that is important to have a rich conversation around the table. And working at 3 or 4 organisations, I started very nascent women development programmes, but at BT, joining them 18 months ago, I got the chance to launch a Pan-BT programme, which has had a fantastic impact on retaining our talented women that we already have in the organisation, but also attracting the right mix of male and female candidates through our apprentice, our graduate intakes, and also our normal recruitment campaigns up and down the company. So I'm very happy to be able to share some of the learnings we've had from that programme, which we have co-developed with the women, really addressing the specific challenges they're telling us they have in our culture and our environment, and responding to that. So happy to share those learnings today.
Great. I'm going to kick off by asking a question that actually almost always comes up at these kind of events when we talk about gender diversity, in fact any kind of diversity, which is it non-negotiable, the fact that you have to have gender diversity in your teams? What's the moral case for it? Or is it a bottom line case? Is it just the fact that if you're not tapping into that talent pool, then you're not fully availing yourself of the talent that is out there? What is the case for gender diversity?
I think there's a fundamental commercial case for it, first and foremost, and that's often how initiatives like the one we started at BT, the Tech Women Initiative, has got support. We've created the bottom line case, talking about the various research studies that have proven with good diversity comes better bottom line results, but also closer customer centricity, because you now represent the breadth of your customers in your own workforce. You can better design for those, and also to spark innovation through the broad range of skills and inputs you have. But there is a moral issue, and I think in the last 18 months, BT's light bulb has gone off as to why it is the right thing to do as an organisation. As we came together with EE, who had a very different culture to us, we relaunched our corporate values, we relaunched our leadership framework, and so we've put diversity and inclusion at the heart of both of those 2 frameworks within our organisation, and making sure it is every individual's responsibility to build and support an inclusive environment where diversity will thrive.
So do you, for example, look at each tier of your management, and you may want to pitch in, Nupur, with yours, and Alison, do you look at each tier and think, you know, because what tends to happen is as you go up the tiers, the women get less visible, they're kind of dropping out. So how does it work for you doing that?
Apart from the bottom line issue and the financial issue, there is also a talent issue or the talent agenda, for which you simply can't ignore 50% of your talent pool if you are not hiring women in the team. So when I look at my own organization, out of 378,000 people, roughly 35% of us are women. More than 100,000 women in the organization are women. So you just can't survive or stay competitive if you ignore this pool of talent which you have in the world. And of course, as you said, the numbers are 35% globally, but when you start looking at the tier, we are probably 28% in the middle, and that's a long way to go, because we should at least mirror the global the global average which we have of 34-35%. So of course we start looking at the different tiers, we start looking at why we are losing people at different levels, and what are the different initiatives which can be put in place to ensure that we build our talent pool at the different level in the organization.
So Alison, how do you ensure that you've got women at every tier?
So we have a real challenge in that we are very specialist. 95% of our graduates are STEM. They come from the STEM community. And also some of the work we do is UK sensitive. So we have to be aware of where we're attracting our talent pool, so we're already narrowed on that. And when you look at our profile, these are long gestation projects, research and development, etc. So we have a profile which is you could characterise as sort of male, stale, and pale. And we work very, very hard. And over the last 18 months, please just we've worked very hard to look at our policies on retention, recruitment, promotion. And by making the panels of those decision makers diverse, you start to pull through different thinking. By educating, and we've done a similar thing with our leadership, we've recognised that we need to educate our leadership. About a fifth of our company have gone through this training on what diversity inclusion really means, and particularly focusing on unconscious bias. So you may not want to, but actually you start to feel or think certain ways just by where you come from, how you've been educated, the culture that you come from. So we've put significant effort into that. We will see results. Our diversity profile at the moment is about 22% women to men.
Is that at every tier though?
No, we are in the pipeline coming through, it's better. And at the senior levels, we're starting to see improvements around 17, 18, 19%. It's in that middle area where you start to look at your retention. So basically when children, babies, returners, and we work very hard on making it, we have very flexible working policies. But
what do you call flexible?
Flexible is part-time versus full-time, and we don't yet have working from home. We're not in that industry, but we're looking to be more flexible that way, and a lot of our IT enablers will start to give us that. But certainly making it easier. If I think about one of our senior engineers, she's worked part-time and has now come back in full-time now. Her children are through schooling, but we certainly support that. We recognise we have to do that. It still only fits around a number of people. So it's challenging. And the main thing we've learned as a leadership is you have to work at it. You have to be proactive, because if you don't, it's just not going to happen. So, and one of the things we do is we link very closely through WISE, which is Women in Science and Engineering specifically, but there are others, to learn from other businesses of how they've done it, because in our industry, we're all challenged with access to that talent pool.
Now, I'm very conscious that sometimes when you're on a panel like this, you want to talk about your success stories. And I think all of us, including me as a journalist, wants to hear about where you can do better. What are you currently not doing that you think you should be doing, or that you're pushing your organisations to do in order to get that gender balance up?
I think we've had some really strong success with Tech Women, addressing the female talent pool. What we're going to be doing this year.
What's Tech Women?
The Tech Women is a year-long development programme for our middle management layer, where we had the biggest exit rates and the lowest intake. So we had a brain drain, a talent drain at that layer. So we've specifically developed a set of interventions for them. There are 6 modules during the year. It's 4 days of assessments, things on building confidence, creating your personal brand and taking control of your own career development, how to network effectively and authentically, broader leadership skills and understanding of BT strategy, technology futures, the market industry, etc. But the important thing is we put a coaching, a mentoring and a sponsorship wrap around the programme, so every participant has those 3 individuals supporting them through the year.
Do you offer that to men as well?
We don't at the moment, and we have been discussing that. We decided for the next year to keep it for women exclusively. And the reason we've done that is partly from feedback from the participants who've been through the last 2 years of programme, where they've said they wouldn't have been able to practice the skills we're giving them in a safe environment had men been in the room. They wouldn't have felt as comfortable doing that.
So it's a safe, man-free space?
It's not man-free. Some of our facilities is male. And we, at the start of every day, we have a sofa chat, a bit like this, with some of our male leaders, where we have an open Q&A around how things are going in their businesses, their approach to diversity and inclusion, etc. So it's not male-free zone. There are just no male participants at the moment.
I feel like we're going to do a lot of apologising to James.
That's all right.
We're very happily not male-free today. But no, that's where could you be doing better?
For us, it's the other way around, which we are focusing on, and we think we can do much better on that. How do we network our high potential women to
How do you network?
My women category, the middle level women
Right.
leaders, managers, to senior leaders in the organization. And this connection, we are deliberately doing it. It's more of a he for she campaign. We are deliberately connecting and networking them and giving them a mentoring opportunity with senior men in the organization.
Oh, right. So you're pairing women
With
men.
So we are not keeping it a women-free zone. We are networking them and giving them a mentor who are men. And I think with our statistics and data, we do see very positive results coming out from it.
What do you call a positive result? Is it retention of those women?
More than retention, is the movement of these women to higher leadership position.
Oh, okay.
So we have a similar issue.
Yes.
We encouraging women to apply for jobs, for new roles and promotions. And what we found is that as engineers, we're very rational, and we will write pages and pages of, could you have all these things? So there might be 10, 20 things that the attributes for the job. And what you'll find is women will go, well, I can do 18 out of the 20, so I won't apply. Whereas there is more confidence, if you like, in what we find in our men. For those. So you have to tailor your job specifications, if you like, to encourage more people to put themselves forward, and it's back to that confidence that you need to engender, particularly in the women candidates.
That is so true, and that is something we have learned. I think the hard way, recruitment, it still remains a big problem for us, in that if we just sit back and do nothing, we will just recruit men. And you can agonise about making sure the job description is written in a careful way, and you can train your panel. You can have equal representation of men and women on the panel. You can have them all, having done unconscious bias training. And as you sit back, for the reason you say, you'll find that it's just the men who are applying. And you're sitting there with a long list that has got, or a list of applicants that is predominantly male, and then you begin to realise, well, what am I going to do now? Because you have to run a process through, and it will inevitably, or could very well lead to the recruitment of a man. We've tried something here which is called Know Your Pool, and thanks to Dot for coming up with that idea. Know Your Pool, which is know your pool of applicants. Know your pool of applicants and be proactive in encouraging women to apply.
So would that mean if you want to fill an academic position, identifying women who are sort of eligible that may not have otherwise put themselves forward?
Yes, and
so actually going to
and I think comes back to what you said about the 20 criteria. The 20 criteria for the job, and a man will think, oh, I've got 5 of those, I'll give it a go. and the woman will be counting, I've only got 18, I am not suited for that job. It's so common.
It's really interesting because actually when Nupur introduced herself in her 2-minute speech, I don't know if anyone else picked up, but one of the things you said was you deliberately went for a job that was bigger than you.
Yes.
And I thought that was such a striking statement, because you don't often find women doing that.
Yes, and probably I was able to do it because very early on I had a few mentors identified whom I always went to seek their support, their advice. And
out of interest, were they men, women?
2 of them were men.
Out of
3.
You had
2
a lot
of them were men, and it was the men who were always encouraging me, saying, throw your hat, take it, you can do it.
Yes.
And twice I did that. I took up a role which was much, much, much bigger than what I was capable of doing, and it just paid for me.
I think mentors and sponsors are really critical to encouraging women to leap and to take a leap of faith. What we also found is that through our programme and the social network that's built around it, the network itself has now become self-supporting, and the women have been encouraging each other to apply, which has been a side effect we didn't realise we were going to get out of the programme.
So you have an audience of not just women, but a lot of women who presumably are here because they want to get on in their careers, and they don't want to be leaking out of that pipeline. They want to go all the way up to the top. Yes. So you've mentioned mentors, you've mentioned sort of having the guts to apply for jobs that are bigger than you. What other kinds of really important advice would you give, perhaps based on your own experience? I'm wondering about, for example, failure, learning to fail well, I think is may be important and taking risks. I'm trying to get my teenage daughter, who's a bit of a perfectionist, to do that sort of thing, take more risks, because unless you take those, you can't progress really. But what about your own what has worked for you? I mean, we've heard from you, Alison. What's worked for you? I mean, you really are, I think of you as in a very male-dominated profession.
So what's worked for me? I guess, I mean, some of it goes back to my childhood. I had very supportive parents, but my father was an engineer. Now, what I saw about engineering was not the legacy of building roads or bridges or ports and harbours, which actually the heavy civils is what I went into, but the fact I could travel the world. So that was really appealing to me, because we, as a family, travelled around the world. And with that comes a confidence that difficult choices or risks that you might take become easier because you've experienced it, or you know someone who has. And in my particular career, I've had some excellent mentors. Generally, they have been men, and generally they have spent the time helping me be more, and this comes back to the learning point of how to communicate at that business level. It's not necessarily the technical solution, it's also it's also about money and business and understanding that, and also being specific about your message, because as girls we like to chat and we talk about all sorts of things, but in particularly business and getting to senior levels, you need to be really specific and be able to get to the yes/no position. And that's an art and a skill that we're not necessarily taught. You learn that along the way. And I got that from some of my mentors. And again, back to your point, I was pushed. Of course you can do that. There's no reason why you shouldn't. Give it a go. And some of it's being in the right place at the right time. That does certainly play into that.
Seizing opportunity.
Yeah.
Again, I want to, there are some lovely questions coming through here, in which I'm going to open up the questions now, because we want to get some of that two-way dialogue. So just to remind you, if you want to ask a question, go to slido.com, enter the code Imperial Women. Do we need a hashtag in front of that, or is it just Imperial Women, cap I, cap W? So some of the ones that are coming through now, really, really good actually. So this one's from someone who wants to be anonymous. I'm a woman in leadership and have been asked by a very senior male executive, don't initiatives for women negatively disadvantage men?
There's nothing stopping people setting up men leadership development programs.
Aren't they just old boys clubs, which exist anyway?
Yeah. I think there have been informal and formal structures supporting men in the workplace for decades, if not centuries. I think we need a specific intervention now to address the issues that the women are telling us they're facing. It's not disadvantage men, it's levelling the playing field.
I would, if there are men who feel disadvantaged, then I think they've got the problem, not the woman. I would be concerned if a man said, "No, this is holding me back."
Right. Now this is a very interesting one. Quotas. Ooh. Now I wanted to ask this as well, because there are certainly in certain countries, like Germany, Iceland, I think, have quotas for board level proportions of women. So you have to have a certain number of women or a certain proportion of women directors on the board. What does the panel think about gender quotas, and have your organisations used them?
So it is a really emotional subject, quotas, targets. If you like, because
targets are different from quotas.
Yeah,
though,
the quotas are a means to get something done. I'm not saying that I agree with it, but I do. Lady Barbara Judge was really clear. She said, we don't like the presence of quotas. Actually, the results that they give kick the ball down the road and actually start getting you to that balanced approach. And you can't disagree with her on that. We use targets, and it's really around how we support getting, we are aiming 50-50 by 2020 for our apprentice intake, for example. It's an audacious target given the fact that only so many people, so many apprentices in STEM subjects, and we need many, many more, so there's more competition in the marketplace for it. But if you don't try, you're not going to get anywhere near it, in my view, and that's the right thing. It's the right thing for business, it's the right thing for industry, it's the right thing for the talent pool.
So if you set that as a quota for AWE, the apprentice,
how would you
50-50.
no, but as a quota, there has to. What's the result if you don't do it? What's the compensation? What's the so what? And I think you have to ask yourself that all the time. I don't know what the others think, because you've seen what the issue is in Scandinavia.
So yes. I'm just a bit confused. Are you absolutely committing to 50% of your apprentices by 2020 being women?
Yes, we are targeting 50-50 for our apprentices coming through in 2020. Whether we'll make it or not is a different matter.
Right.
But if you don't try for it, you definitely won't get it.
So it's a target, not a quota?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But a strong target, it seems.
Yeah.
Quotas, James?
I think so. Quotas or targets. No, I have concerns about quotas. I have concerns about interfering with selection processes to bias them one way or another. Targets, on the other hand, our leaky pipeline, for example, starts with 38% of our students female. And by the time we get to senior professors, or professors rather, it's 15%. It is, to me, not an unreasonable target at all for us to aim for at least 38% female professors, because then we will have stopped that part of the pipeline leaking. The other part of the problem is, of course, why is there only 38% of female students coming in? That's STEM, that's a national problem, that's a problem for schools, we need to work with schools. But I do think being aware of these numbers in the organisation can be very helpful in working out ways to address them. And I don't think quotas, I think quotas are entirely different.
Quotas gives the impression that you're being promoted or given a job because of your gender, not because of your ability. And that, I think, is something none of us want.
What would you say to those who say, well, actually, a quota just gets you your foot in the door where you can then prove you can do the job?
I think you can do that with an ambition or a target, as well, and it's the right behaviours. There are so many negative consequences of setting quotas. I've worked in an organisation that had a quota around gender, and I was brought in along with 23 other very senior women into the organisation, and 2 years later only one of them remained because they hadn't been set up for success. They were assumed to have only got the job because they were women, and people were openly discussing that in front of them and behind their backs. So you're saying
it's
demeaning? It undermines the
position,
and it undermines the mandate you might have and the responsibility of the role that you hold. And we actually talked to our Women's Network about it. So, what do you think about this? And there was a resounding no around quotas. There was a lot of uncomfortableness around targets as well. But they could understand. We all understood why. So, it was a collective opportunity that we took in our D&I strategy.
So that's really. What about you, Nupur?
We don't have quotas, we don't have targets. For the simple reason, we don't want to limit ourselves. We do everything possible. We get governed by a Tata Code of Conduct. Everything possible gets done to ensure that you provide equal opportunity. We do a lot of work with schools and universities, encouraging girl students to opt for science, engineering, maths. But who knows what's the right number? Maybe it's 60% women, which is the right number. Why limit yourself to 50%? So
you mentioned schools. That's an area where we have also focused, outreaching into the community. We get a lot of applicants that way.
Another question here, again from someone anonymous. What has the take-up of shared parental leave been by men in your organisations? And do you think there are barriers that are stopping them from taking it up, if they are?
I don't know what our numbers are, but I do know that we have had a number of high-profile senior guys take shared parental leave, which has been real kudos to them, and actually really signals the way for the rest of the business to reduce the perception around it, if you like. But I don't know the actual numbers. I have to go and have a look.
And what happens when what happens, for example, when a very senior male executive or female executive takes parental leave? Does that then present an issue for the company who then have to kind of fill their shoes while they're gone? What happens? Because you've then got someone who isn't there for however many months.
I think with parental leave you can plan for that as an organisation. I mean, if you've got strong succession and talent planning, it's a great opportunity to try out one of your talented people in an interim role at that senior level. So we look at it as quite positively, and I think the more men and women who do that and do it transparently and openly and talk about the reasons why they're taking leave, whether it's parental or for extended care or even sabbaticals, which we also encourage, it sets a precedent and sets a great visible role model for the rest of our organisation.
I think for us, I know there is someone in the room who knows exactly how many of my men colleagues have taken shared parental leave. I think for us, it's still early days. I mean, we embraced it, we set it up, we encouraged it, and then we just are waiting to see what the uptake actually is. I think it's only been around for...
Does somebody in the audience know what the stats are?
I was hoping he wasn't looking to
Oh, do contribute. Yes.
Sorry, I should say this is Louise Lindsay, our Director of HR.
Yeah.
So,
Hello.
I know our numbers are low, but what we have done, which I think is what it's not the period after the immediate birth of the child, but we've done a profile on senior staff taking. We've done a profile on senior male staff taking flexible working, so leaving to go to the school concert or the sports day or to do the 4 p.m. finish, and that's been really powerful in terms of a message, probably more so than shared parental leave at this point in time.
So just flexible working is allowing you to...
By senior male colleagues.
Yeah. Right, okay.
But being open about that, our chief executive does that, and it's a great example for the rest of the team.
Okay. And I'm guessing it's easier for bigger companies to do that.
Very much
because they have the slack in the system, I guess. Is that the case?
I think it's easier. I don't think it's impossible if you're smaller, if you plan.
No, it's about planning.
If anyone wants to ask a question in the room, we do have people with mics, so please raise your hand if you'd prefer to do it that way. I'm going to take, there's a lady here in the middle.
I have actually submitted a question, but it's easier just to ask now.
Do.
My name is Rima, I'm from the
Jump the
EMBA programme. Professor Sterling, you mentioned that other countries were doing better at women in the workplace. Could you just elaborate on that? And could you also tell me how is the UK failing the most?
Right. Well, just before we came in, I had a very interesting conversation with Nupur here, and she was telling me about how it is in India, and the perception of women into engineering is so totally different in India, and I was really interested as to how she described it. Maybe, can I just pass to you and you tell them what you told me? I was fascinated by it.
I was talking to him about the young school girls opting for STEM, engineering and maths. When I've been in UK for 10 years and we work a lot with the schools, and when you go here in the schools, you see that young adults and young ones are not opting to study science and engineering, and something to do with maths that they get put off very early on. And that's not the experience which we have in India. You see people, in fact, when you go to the university, the chances are that 50 to 60% of the women studying engineering will be women. So it's a completely different experience in the country where you don't expect that kind of a ratio, has that kind of a ratio, that you have more and more women studying science, opting for maths, and probably they feel that if they study that, they will achieve the equality which they all are aiming for. And it starts at home. At home, the parents will tell the son and the daughter both to study maths and to probably become an engineer, and the roles are not defined based on the gender.
Yeah, it's interesting given that India is quite a patriarchal society,
Yes.
but the way I find the difference, that the cultural differences you see how STEM careers are perceived around the world. It's funny because my husband sometimes describes himself as a physicist, sometimes as an engineer. Yeah. And if you say you're an engineer in Germany, they're kind of, they really look up to you. Yeah. If you say you're an engineer at a party in London, they think you fix dishwashers. You know what I mean? It's that kind of difference in approach. But those countries are doing very well. I mean, I look at something like 30%, I think, of India's engineers are women. Yeah. Why isn't that happening here?
I think probably I'll say, I was amazed. I've got 2 boys and I was buying some gift for a girl, and I was amazed when I started looking at Lego, and that was the first time I realized a few years back that you have different Lego sets for boys and different Lego sets for girls. So probably it starts there. It's pink in color. It will be the one for the boys, which I usually buy. I wasn't aware that there's a different world for the girls. It's more about garages and mechanics and aeroplane and robotics, whereas those for girls are very much about hairdryer and a couch and a living room.
No, so that came up as a very popular question actually on Slido, which is that the stereotypes on women's roles start from the earliest age.
Exactly.
For example, dolls and housekeeping and that sort of thing, and that's still true today.
I think the media has a big
What
part
should
to play.
we do?
The media has a huge part. I think we've got to be pushing more visible, credible role model and relevant role models out there for young girls in schools, and talking about STEM in a practical sense, not deep physics, but talking about how you can, the applied side of physics, how it can affect the fashion industry, how it can affect the automotive industry, bringing it back into practical reality for them rather than talking about theoretical. It does appear to appeal more to girls in terms of attracting them to STEM subjects.
Something I'm very proud of, we did just a couple of months ago, the college has adopted something called the Science Toy Awards. Some of my colleagues last year had proactively set up an award scheme for where toy manufacturers could submit their toys, and they could win a prize if the toys were both scientifically provided scientific education, but were also completely gender neutral. And Lego, with its pink ponies and warriors for the boys and whatever, are never going to win, at least not until they change. But we did have the first round of this competition last year. Very interesting. It can be done. Of course it can be done. Of course you can have toys which are scientifically educational and yet don't have any pink or any colour or anything attached to them. So we're looking forward to seeing how that goes.
How that pans out. There was that incredible Lego set, do you remember, that was funded by Kickstarter, I think, which took exactly this point. I think I wrote a column about it, and it had originated because of these. I don't know if you ever go to Hamleys, and they have colour-coded floors for boys and girls, which is quite incredible. And so the floor 3 or 4 has pink labels, and then floor 4 is blue, and it's cars, action, Meccano, that sort of thing. But I want to again be very. I want to be able to give our audience advice. What would you say to women out here in this audience looking online that maybe feel either they're battling against a glass ceiling, they want to make that next step. They may also be wanting to take time out to have a family. And we know that seems to be a disproportionate issue for women in the workplace. What would your advice be in a nutshell? And then I'm going to ask you for your pledges. What do they need to do? They just need to be bold, take more risks. Say, sod you uncompliant male senior. I'm going to go for your job. What works? What's going to work?
I'd say treat your career as your most important project. Imagine it's the most important project you're going to have throughout your entire life, and plan for it as you would a critical, complex project in your work life. Think about the skills and experience you've already acquired. Think about what skills and experiences you want to acquire next. And if you're not in the right organisation to be able to do that, be brave and move. Before you do that, I would say find a mentor that can help you through the particular challenges you're facing, that have potentially faced those themselves and have got through them and have got some great techniques and learnings they can share with you to help you on that journey.
And this, I suppose, applies to men as well.
It's gender neutral.
For everyone.
It's for everyone, absolutely.
Nupur, what would be your advice?
Just go after the opportunity. Don't put ceiling before you or around you. Sometimes it's just on our head. And even if you go on maternity leave, I went on my maternity leave when I was the HR director. So I was in a particular senior most position. And that is fine. You don't need to be feeling guilty about it that you went on maternity leave. You're no way less than the other male colleague which you have around you.
I would say, in addition to that, challenge the system. We're trying to get it right, but if we advertise a job and say it's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, challenge that. Can it be done flexibly? Can it be done part-time? Can it be done at home? We are far more receptive as an organisation to people asking us to vary the terms and conditions of the jobs. We try and anticipate, but please do challenge us on these.
So take a risk, and if you know if the 20th attribute on the list is the working conditions, and that's stopping you apply anyway, and try to change them.
For some help. You're always willing to share your experiences. And I'd also say, remember you have choices, and you're in control. Whatever it is that you're at, you have choices. It may be with your existing company, or it may be somewhere else. But actually the decision and choice is yours, not anyone else's. And if you remember that, then the barriers just disappear.
So it's having that strength of character, developing that strength of character.
Developing that strength of character and confidence is what I say to anyone who's gender neutral on any of that. I'd also say, one of my mentees came to me and said, I've got a 25-year plan, would you go through it with me? And I said, okay, let's start with the first 5 years, because as soon as a plan hits action, it changes.
I think Rachel would approve of that. 25, plan it all.
No. It's the next few steps.
Before we wrap up, I want you to each reveal your pledges. Now, when I was asked to come and moderate this discussion today, one of the issues that came up is what would be the legacy of today, because very often you have events like this and nothing concrete comes out. You hear a bit of advice, but I've asked, and the panelists have very kindly agreed to actually make a concrete pledge that is to do with gender equality, and I would like them to each reveal what their pledges are. Let's start with you, Rachel.
Okay. So last week I went to see the very inspiring movie Hidden Figures. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was sobbing by about minute 12 and then cheering by about minute 28, and it went on that cycle. But I've decided that BT as an organisation doesn't celebrate its hidden figures. We talk about characters such as Professor Tommy Flowers, that was pivotal in our history, but we don't have any equivalent female role models. So my pledge is to work with the BT archives and develop a sense of BT's hidden figures and celebrate those across the organisation to create some fantastic visible role models from our history and from our present day.
Fantastic.
We do a lot of work around conscious, unconscious bias, but I think there's still a scope to do a lot more to make it a more equitable workplace. And that's the pledge I have to make today, that I will invest as an organization, as HR director, I'll invest more in training our managers around conscious and unconscious bias and make them understand what it is and to challenge it.
James.
The event today was organised by our wonderful Imperial Business Partners team, and colleagues on the panel are our partners. I have learned so much from this conversation, just the last half hour. I have learned so much from the conversations we had in the green room before. So my pledge is, as far as Imperial Business Partners are concerned, I want to see this issue regularly on the agenda. We did talk about it at one of our partners' meetings a number of years ago, and then I think we thought, we've done that, ticked that box, sorted that. But I do think we have a lot to learn from each other, and I would love to tap in more to the experiences and knowledge and wisdom of colleagues from these particular organisations, but from all our business partners. And my pledge is to make it, as it were, a standing item for Imperial Business Partners' annual agenda.
Alison.
So my pledge is to bring back what we've learnt today, what I've learnt today from talking to the panel, and drive that into our diversity and inclusion strategy. And we're going to continue to deliver the plan and evolve that plan so that we can attract more talent and sustain that talent in the organisation, because it's just inherent to the UK.
Thank you very much. I think that's a brilliant moment at which to thank you for your pledges, thank you for your contribution, and hand over, I think, to Dot, who's going to wrap up for us. Thank you.
And let me thank you very, very much for sharing it so well.
Thank you.
Enabling such a wonderful discussion. So, but we thank the panel very, very much. Clearly, thanks to James's pledge, the start of a conversation, not the end of a conversation. And I think that's a fantastic thing for Imperial to be able to take away from tonight. There is one more thing tonight. We have a reception outside, which I hope everyone will join us. And we have our own hidden histories. We weren't going to call it that, but it's become our own hidden figures. We're going to launch a book tonight of women at Imperial College. So I hope you'll join us for that upstairs now for the next hour or so. So thank you very much for everybody to contribute and for everybody who made this happen. Enjoy. Thank you.